Awesome. Welcome back to the show floor at reInvent. Wherever you are joining us from in the world, we appreciate your taking the time and joining us on our first ever day of Industries Live. Industries Live will be streaming all of next year on Thursdays, every other Thursday. So please mark that down from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Excited to have everybody here with us today that we've had as partners so far, and excited to talk with Cockroach Labs now. So I'm Dr. Karen Hildebrand, and I lead our solutions architects at AWS in several different industries, including financial services, healthcare, life sciences, telco, media, entertainment, games, and sports. And I am pleased to be co-hosting here with Addy.
Hey, I'm Addy Dubhashi. I'm part of our industry solutions team, and I work with our partners to construct our ISV technology better together place to support our customers with the line of business and financial services. I am super excited to welcome Allen of Cockroach Labs.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate all the audience for joining us today. So Allen Terleto, I lead the Global Partners and Ecosystems organization at Cockroach Labs. A little bit about me. So I started my career about 20 years ago. About half of that spent within the enterprise. So doing just about everything you could do in the software development life cycle. So started as a developer, moved into application architecture, solution architecture, enterprise architecture, even some support. So kind of ran the gamut there. Got a little bit tired and decided I'm going to go do something crazy, like join a startup, and spent the last 10 years in the database space, doing quite a bit of a role, so including sales and some marketing and solutions architecture leader. Most recently, I was the field CTO at Redis, so that's an in-memory database. And then I was lucky enough to join Cockroach Labs, where we're doing amazing things with AWS and our partnership together.
Awesome. Allen, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you have a great name as a company. So can you tell everybody that's streaming who is maybe not familiar with what Cockroach Labs does, just like a really quick soundbite of what is Cockroach Labs?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cockroach Labs is the provider of Cockroach DB, so that's the industry-leading distributed SQL database. Effectively, you could think of it as a Postgres database that scales out like a NoSQL database. So unlike a lot of the alternatives in the market where they took open source Postgres and kind of dressed it up to look like a distributed database, what we did is we built a database from the ground up and made it look like Postgres. So think about a NoSQL database that can horizontally scale, multi-master architecture. It has a Raft protocol, so we can guarantee strong consistency, the kinds of guarantees that you had within your traditional legacy databases. And then we expose ourselves to the users as Postgres, so effectively they don't have to worry about all of the operational things that are happening behind the scenes that allow them to survive and thrive through any kind of regional downtime or availability zone downtime. And effectively, you just go ahead and develop as if it was Postgres. And that's where the Cockroach name came along, because as they say in nuclear events, the only thing that's going to survive is a cockroach, and Cockroach DB can survive anything.
I love that. I love that.
It gets straight to the picture, right? Like
yeah.
That'll totally work. And that's so fascinating, because the resiliency capabilities of Cockroach Labs is so important. Customers in financial services are looking for that resiliency. And so, Allen, I want to pass it back to you. What are you seeing coming through from customers along the subject of resiliency through 2024? How are they thinking and applying Cockroach DB?
Yeah, so let's just take, I guess, the financial services industry, and let's just take a step back, and I'll kind of be reductive and try to make it fun for the purposes of the show, right? So if you come back to me, with me for, let's say, about 20 years back, and if you're like under 25, you might not get this reference, but if I came up to a friend and I said, hey, what do you think about AI? They're going to be like, oh yeah, he scored 30 points. He crossed up Michael Jordan, because they're probably thinking about Allen Iverson, right? It was a different world back then. And in that world, we weren't necessarily doing digital banking, mobile banking. We were actually doing crazy things like calling the stockbroker to put in, our trade. And then when you think about the limitations of that is, you can only move as fast as a human does some kind of data entry in terms of the operation against the database. So the databases that were created 50, maybe 60 years ago, so all the household names, Oracle and SQL Server and DB2 on the mainframe, they were good enough to handle that world. But then the world changed, right? And financial services had to change with it, and fintechs came along, and users started doing mobile banking. And when you think about all of that is, me checking constantly what's going on in the stock market and potentially wanting to react to that right away without having to call someone. That puts a lot of pressure on the database, because the database now has to handle all of those concurrent writes that are happening across the world globally. They're no longer limited by the human interaction. They might even be automated, and the interaction is done by other computers. So the databases of the past, they weren't built to handle that level of scale and capacity. And of course, that's also where the cloud came along and distributed infrastructure to solve that problem. But the databases weren't necessarily transformed until the distributed databases came along, where Cockroach DB came along. So we help our customers to leverage and to optimize for distributed infrastructure, commoditized hardware, so you can scale out your writes, you can scale out your reads to meet the demands of the fintechs of the world, to meet the demands of your customer expectations.
Yeah.
Right? Because the worst possible time that you want to have an outage due to performance is when your meme stock is going through the roof and you absolutely have to buy it. And that's when your Robinhood account or whatever it might be down because maybe the region is down or maybe just that database is having contention. So in addition to performance, with that horizontal scale and multi-master architecture where there's no single point of failure is, even if a region is down, forget about server rack, forget about availability zone. If the entire region was down, you still have business continuity. You never actually went down yourself. The database is still available. And the final thing is being able to deploy anywhere. So something that we see, especially in the financial services space, for these mission-critical workloads, is although financial services are certainly taking advantage of fully managed deployments, for those mission-critical workloads, they absolutely love being on AWS, but they still want to have governance and control of their data. So they'll deploy our software as self-hosted, and in some cases even hybrid. And in some cases, they'll deploy us as fully managed. So we provide all those options, and we provide all of them on AWS.
And that's so interesting because these are fundamental aspects of the new way of working, right? If your strategy is going to be focused on building a cloud-focused application stack, while you're migrating your older systems, you really have to think about those resiliency aspects. Do you have any examples or customer case studies that you've kind of lived through? What was the journey like? How did they come about understanding that Cockroach DB was the right fit? What was the driver or a regulation that probably drove that? And how does that all come together? Make it real for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could think of one customer, really large broker, a household name that I can't necessarily name at this moment, but they kind of went through this journey with us and actually started before us, let's be honest. They were coming off of the mainframe. They did what basically everybody did for the last 10 years, and they took the safe bet, and they said, I'm going to move over to Oracle, and I have 10x scale coming in terms of my 5-year roadmap, and I have a strategy to get on AWS, so let me start off with deploying an Oracle database on AWS, and they used Golden Gate to kind of get around the limitations around scale across multi-AZs and multi-region, and they got to about 70% workload, where everything came crashing down. It was already a brittle architecture, it was already a very expensive architecture, and once they kind of went through that pain, they realized, I don't think we're using the right tool for the job. So what they did is they went through the entire category of distributed SQL databases, and they only came to one conclusion, which is Cockroach DB is the only database that's able to handle the type of scale that they have. And since then, they replaced all of that Oracle installation, and at this point, they're kind of going down the line of all the workloads on their mainframe as well, so tackling a lot of those legacy workloads. And that was a great kind of aha moment for us, because not only were we able to help this customer achieve their goals, but we realized we have a huge opportunity, specifically around modernizing these legacy systems. And we began to build in feature sets that kind of match the types of functional things that you were able to do with your legacy databases, which make absolutely no sense for mutual customers of ours in the digital native space. And Hard Rock Digital, for example, was speaking for us. They're never going to use store procedures. They're never going to use read committed isolation. But you know what? If you're coming over with DB2 and you want to reduce the risks and cost and friction of all of that, that might make a ton of sense for you. And we started to build in those feature sets as well. But here's the thing, and I'll just kind of extend the point if it's okay, is everything worked on DB2 and mainframe, and I had a backup data center, and things were great. But then I go into the cloud world, and now the promise of Cockroach DB is I could do multi-region. That's fantastic. But if I'm in EMEA, for example, and that multi-region crosses geographic boundaries, now all of a sudden I have a new concern, which is data sovereignty.
Yeah.
Yep,
right?
exactly.
So now these new regulations are kicking in that are kind of, I didn't necessarily have to handle in the past. So we have a specialized functionality that allows you to kind of pin data and route data to where it belongs. So if you're a UK customer and you're deploying a global database across the UK and Munich and maybe somewhere else in the world, in India, for example, all of your India customers will route to India and only live in India, and all of your UK customers will. So from a data sovereignty perspective, you still are covered. But you can deploy as a global database, and you can deploy multi-region. So now from an operational resiliency, you're covered as well. And that ties into regulations as well. So we're, the innovators of regulations coming out of the UK, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So,
and we got DORA, and we got all these regulations that are forcing this, enterprises that, from a financial infrastructure perspective, have to have operational resiliency. And of course, that's a sweet spot for us as well.
I was just going to ask you specifically, how are you responding for customers where they're their life is changing with a lot of different regulations in the EU. So do you feel like when you're having customer conversations and you're talking, are there new features that you've been building in that are most aligned to what customers are telling you now?
Yeah, so we're hyper focused on making sure that we handle all the scenarios for operational resiliency that I mentioned, our data sovereignty that I mentioned. I actually failed to mention one of the other regulations that's kind of from the PRA. There's a statutory statement, and it's really impacting a lot of, specifically in EMEA organizations where vendor concentration risk is a big thing. We all know what happened with CrowdStrike, and that almost took down like the airline industry, for example. And these regulators are realizing that if this banking system, this bank is part of our financial infrastructure and it goes down, or it's held hostage for whatever reason, or it can't necessarily handle for that particular vendor solution support because the support goes end of life, that's a material risk on that particular organization. So using a cloud agnostic or agnostic technology like ourselves, where you don't necessarily are ever thinking about leaving AWS. AWS is fantastic, but you could tell the regulator that, hey, I have a solution where if I want to repatriate to on-prem, or I want to move to a different cloud. Not that I absolutely want to do that, but it's enough for the regulator to say, hey, this looks like a less risky solution. So that's another way that we can help them, and we continue to advance our innovation there. I talked about modernization and all the features that we're building there. A lot to talk about cursors and all the kind of support, so triggers. If you're trying to move away from Sybase and SQL Server and Oracle, we have the feature sets to really reduce the risks. But maybe more importantly is why these modernizations happening in addition to what I mentioned already in terms of customer experience. Yep. And that's around Gen AI. We can't have a conversation without mentioning Gen AI.
There's a bell. I feel like they maybe put you up to that. They're right behind us over here.
So this time when I say AI, I'm not talking about Allen Iverson. This time I'm talking about Gen AI is what we're discussing. And what we came out with recently is vector search capability.
Oh,
and
that's huge.
We see Gen AI really kind of restarting these conversations about modernization, because although there's been a lot of solutions in the market already, as we all know, around vector databases, those databases only had access to kind of greenfield information, digitally native generated data, right, through PDFs or whichever kind of modal they work through. But what they never had is access to the system of record data, the operational data, the data that's been locked away on-prem, on DB2, in Oracle. And that's where everything kind of comes together. Because we're able to disrupt and give the same level of assurances that you had on-prem, 5 nines availability, everything we talked about, SQL familiarity. And you can bring that to the cloud and have the same level of resiliency that you had in the past. So you're modernizing, but now all that operational data is converged with your vector database, right? You don't necessarily have to copy it. You have access to it. So now you can, in addition to all that vector embeddings that you added from the greenfield perspective, you can merge that with your operational data. And this is really going to be a game changer. Yeah. Because I think where the market's going is effectively in about a year and a half. When everyone's really going to go to production and want those enterprise-grade features that already are embedded into our capability, there's going to be a commoditization of the vector search capabilities across all the different vector search platforms. And at that point, the only differentiator is going to be who owns the data.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And if the system of record is Cockroach DB and we're able to bring that to the cloud, I think that's really going to be a game changer, and I'm excited to see where that goes.
Yeah.
I will say that is exactly, so when we were prepping for the show and we were deciding which partners are going to be on live with us today, huge shout out to Steve Bacrato. He is a huge fan of what you're able to do in vector search, and I think being able to continue to build alongside with Cockroach Labs has been a huge advantage. You're also one of our competency members, so tell us what that's like being part of the competency for financial services and how that benefits Cockroach Labs as well.
Yeah, so we have a financial services competency, we have a data and analytics competency, we're working towards resiliency, and obviously Gen AI is going to be around the horizon as well.
Excellent.
So all of these things, frankly, are just unlocking our ability to work closer with AWS. So really, over the last year, we've built, we really kind of built up this partnership together and working closer with the teams like Addy's team, for example, to build solutions together. And it's really a door opener for us to have this competency, not only with our customers, but inside AWS as well, because it gives them that assurance that we really understand our customers, we really understand them in depth, and we can solve acute problems together along with AWS. So it's really been a game changer to us in terms of what it meant to our relationship, but also that credibility that we have with our customers.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. I think something that we really want to encourage as part of our competency is, as a specialist partner who brings technology to the fore, you also need a consulting ecosystem around you. You need specialists who can advise customers at the mid-market or in regions that you cannot reach. And so the competency is an enabler to be part of that community of financial services. It helps you really connect together, understand the needs of your customers and kind of be there out there with specialists who can handhold these customers. So when CockroachDB is accessible as a tool, it also then is supported by the consulting ecosystem around it, the partnerships to deploy on a marketplace and access in regions that not everybody might have direct access to. Allen, do you all have a kind of overarching plan, and how can we support you going forward and kind of growing your scale and reach maybe into the mid-market that needs more hand-holding and support?
Yeah, so first of all, we just signed a strategic collaboration agreement with AWS. So AWS is not just inviting me to this amazing opportunity here and just talking about our technology, but they're investing in our relationship and they're investing in our partnership. So first of all, thank you. It's been a great partnership from that point of view. And together, we're hyper-focused on building. So one of the things that we like to do is go to market related to our vector search capability, and we have a distributed index coming out soon, is to go to market together with Bedrock. So we're having conversations with the Bedrock team. That's obviously the way that a lot of our customers are consuming their Gen AI capabilities and RAG frameworks, and we want to be a part of that. So that's just one way that we're building together. But we're also going to market together, and we're also working together more closely in terms of driving specific events and focusing on modernization and being a part of the programs that AWS has around Sybase migration and Oracle migration, and even an opportunity around VMware, which I'm really excited about. You may have heard what's going on with Broadcom and some of these customers really kind of thinking about, do I stay, do I go, what are my options? I think we have a great opportunity together because AWS is obviously focused on that, and there was some great announcements made at this conference related to that. But I think really what we need to do is come together with a comprehensive solution, and we've been talking about that with AWS, where you can kind of have a, in the virtualization and the resource isolation and the orchestration that you had with VMware, and run that on Red Hat, and you can run that on top of AWS. But what are you running, right? You're going to run your apps, but you need a database. And you can run a database like CockroachDB as a distributed cloud native on top of Red Hat. And the beauty of it is of course, you're not going to make in 6 months a decision to maybe go bring 100,000 VMs onto AWS, and you're asking yourself, well, what happens with the rest? What happens? Do I just run specialized hardware and have kind of a disjointed architecture? Well, together with Red Hat, with AWS, we can put the entire stack and have it look the same way in AWS and have it on-prem, and then, of course, just kind of solve the issue of once you're ready and the competency's there, you just click a button, and now you're completely on the cloud and you're cloud ready. So there's some amazing opportunities that we have together. I'm really looking forward to it. So on the Gen AI side, the modernization side, just heavily focusing on financial services together, working with teams like yourselves. It's been really exciting, and I'm appreciative.
Awesome.
All right, last question I promise that I will ask you. For those that are watching and streaming live, they are not here on the show floor of reInvent. What has been your favorite thing so far at reInvent in 2024?
Okay, can it be outside of the actual conference? So I got to talk.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
So I did the biggest dad thing you could do. So we had an amazing event with AWS where we had a suite at the Sphere. If you're not familiar, it's a really cool kind of like IMAX theater on steroids. I don't know how to describe it exactly.
That's the best way to say it.
Yeah. And on the way up, they had this like robot, and that was integrated with AI, and you can speak to it, and it converses with you. So, hi, my name is Allen. It introduces itself. And I went into dad mode, and I was like, all right, my kids are sleeping. I'm from New York, and they're sleeping, and this are the names. Can you say hello to them? And she's, one of my colleagues was holding up a camera, and she's like, is that person with you? And the lady said yes, and she's like, are you ready to record? This is the robot speaking to this person. And she's like, yes. And it goes, Dominic and Juliana, welcome. To, and she put a whole story narrative together about New York City and how they have a Statue of Liberty here, but it's not as big as the one in New York. It was truly amazing. So for me, that was kind of like a I'll see you in the future kind of thing. Where is this going? It just brought it to life for me. So it's really amazing. And I can see in the background our technology is kind of integrating with some of these robots in the future. So pretty exciting.
Right? And it's such a fascinating time to just kind of see it all come together, right? We talk about these technologies and we talk about their potential, but it all just comes together through an experience like you shared, right? It shows you how our lives are changing right in front of us. So no, really appreciate that example. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, best way to end a session is actually a highlight like that. That's fantastic. Thank you for taking the time and being on Industries Live with us here today. And again, for everybody, we are going to switch partners here, and please stay online. We'll have AI 21 coming up next. And remember, again, Thursdays, 2025, every other Thursday. Put them on your calendar for every Thursday, and then we'll tell you which Thursday is the every other from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time. Thanks again, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Thanks for joining us.